What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
And we are live.
And we are live, and
People are
already
pouring in.
people are pouring in.
Wait, well, you just told me something off record. What does
Off
Lauren
record?
say?
Confident? I can't say it was
Not
confidential.
confidential.
Welcome, everybody. Yes, I was just saying to my young friend Jeff here, when Jeff said, am I ready, as in ready to open this up and let you fabulous folks in? I said, well, to quote Lorne Michaels, the producer extraordinaire of Saturday Night Live, he's famous for saying, we don't put on the show, or we don't start the show at 11:30 because we're ready. We start the show because it's 11:30. I think it's I think I'm screwing it up, but
You
it's
like completely messed up. I thought it was great, and that was the longest
but it's
answer.
it's deeper than that just sounded. They don't start the show because they're ready. They start the show because they kind of have.
Well, deep is not our thing. So
yeah.
Welcome everybody. And as you're coming in, we always have a question of the day. Question for today in the chat box on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely not, 10 being absolutely. Rate this statement. My workplace is psychologically safe. On a scale of 1 to 10, my workplace is psychologically safe.
So on a scale of 10, you feel completely psychologically safe. You can speak your mind. You can ask challenging questions, suggest outrageous ideas.
And don't forget, because Sanjay's not here, I'll make the announcement to that little blue button that should say everyone instead of just hosts and panelists. If it does, change it to everyone.
We've got a 5. We've got a 7. We've got a 12. Wow.
Right.
Bob.
I'm going to hear more about that.
Does Bob, do you work for yourself? Is that why you're a 12?
That's probably it, right? I forgot about that.
Oh, you're past retirement. Oh, so yeah. Now you don't even have any filters. What can they do to you exactly? 7. Those are pretty good scores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I have pretty safe, except for our wives are downstairs. I mean, not together, but never mind.
Carol, if you go up to the view box, I suspect you have put the view on gallery. The upper right corner, you'll have the button view. You probably have it on speaker view instead of gallery.
That's pretty adamant. She can't, period. Just be quiet.
What?
I don't know why.
Yes, she can.
Well, that means you can't see all 4 of us then, Carol. It'll fix itself. Okay.
There's only 2. Don't mess with Carol.
And I do want to say that we're desperately missing our 2 other musketeers.
Well, desperately? Jeff?
Oh, missing. Yeah. Somewhat missing. No,
somewhat missing.
It's just you and me today.
Mildly missing.
So why don't we get, oh, by the way, for those of you just joining us, the question is on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely not, 10 being absolutely, rate the sentence, my workplace is psychologically safe. And if you want to put it in the chat box, I have no clue what psychologically safe means. That's okay too, because that is our segue into today's program.
What? Is that our topic?
That is our topic today.
What?
So, Michael, what day is it?
Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to another Every Other Wednesday. This Every Other Wednesday just happens to be Wednesday, May 29th, 2024.
We're done with May already.
I know, we're almost done with May. That's crazy.
Incredible.
Yes. And so I'll start things off. I'm Michael Kerr, coming to you as I usually am from Canmore, Alberta, in the beautiful Canadian Rockies. I speak and write about workplace culture, inspiring leadership, and humor in the workplace. And the theme days today, Jeff, we have to get those out. It is Learn About Composting Day, Put a Pillow on Your Fridge Day, Alligator Day, and World Otter Day. So to all you otter fans out there, it ought to be a great day. Oh my God. And
what Jeff, a dad joke. And could you please explain Put a Pillow on Your Fridge Day?
It's
and by the way, fridge is a very Canadian thing. So.
Fridge. Oh, you don't say fridge in the United States? What do you say?
Refrigerator.
Refrigerator. Well, are you fancy speaking English people? Refrigerator. Honey, what's in the refrigerator this evening?
Yes.
Well.
No, we actually say fridge in our house, but that's because that's where we grew up. So what does it mean? Or you're
What is
not going to
what?
explain. You're just going to just put a pillow on your
Oh,
fridge.
put a pillow on your fridge. It's a energy conservation thing.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
And Jeff, who are you?
Oh, yes. I'll introduce myself. My name is Jeff Toe, coming to you from beautiful Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about personal stuff, but I got to tell my personal story really quick, Mike. I have two daughters, one in Maui and one right here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And 2 weeks ago, she informed us that she and her fiance were moving to Seattle, Washington, breaking our hearts and leaving this week. And he quit his job. She rented out her house, which she owns. They packed up. And yesterday, the company rescinded the job. So
Wow.
we were empty nesters for a little while, but apparently not anymore. Just want to throw it in. It has nothing to do with anything, but now I feel much better having vented. So,
Having got that off your chest. Well, it does have to do with what we speak about here.
yeah, because we are a psychologically safe home.
That's true. So we should be able to, talk about this stuff. But also, your story there seems to suggest that that company that rescinded the offer may have a bit of a culture problem.
Yes. Can I say the name? No, I'm kidding. It's actually one of the largest construction companies in the world, which
It rhymes with.
I won't even go there. So,
Okay.
Mike, I'm going to start. I have a question for you. You have a new book coming out.
I do. Thank
And
you.
and part of it you suggested had something about psychological safety. Do you want to just tell us in what context?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for the plug, Jeff. I do have a new. I'm hoping July. Sometimes it'll be in my hot little hands. It's all designed. It's all finished. Front cover's good to go. We're rocking along. The book is called Small Moments, Big Outcomes: How Leaders Create Cultures That Fuel Extraordinary Results. And a big part of the theme of this book is centered around the idea of creating psychological safety in the workplace, especially on my chapter in communication. I urge everybody to look at the topic of communication in their workplace through the lens of creating psychological safety for employees, creating a sense of belonging, true belonging for employees, and giving employees a real voice at work. And I argue in the book, I suggest in the book that if you focus on those three things, psychological safety, creating a sense of belonging, giving everyone a real voice, you will be very far along in terms of creating a truly inspiring, rocking workplace culture that drives great results.
So what is it? What is psychological safety in your own words?
Well, in my words, it's just creating that safe environment where people feel free to ask challenging questions, to suggest outrageous ideas, to point out a performance or a safety issue, to be able to speak up comfortably and not have to fear for any recriminations, to not fear that it's going to...
Not being humiliated in front of other people. And it goes
Right.
deep. I mean, it's not just positive things. Obviously, they talk up about mistakes that they see in the workplace. And so many organizations that I've worked with pay lip service to it. But when you dig down into the weeds a little bit, people are afraid, right?
Oh,
I mean,
for sure.
it doesn't mean that, it's often interpreted as everybody's got to be nice to each other all the time. And instead, I think what it means is that, people just want to have the right to brainstorm out loud, to voice their opinion and to suggest ideas.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And to not have to feel like they have to self-censor themselves all the time, to not feel like they have to speak like somebody else, like they have to adapt or modify their personality to fit into this team or fit into this workplace, not feel like they have to walk on eggshells in a meeting and not speak up because no one else is bringing up this issue. So who am I to bring up this issue, right? It's a multifaceted but really important topic.
For those people who have been around with us forever, Carol, we did have a guest about a year and a half ago whose focus is 100% on psychological safety. His name is Robert Grossman. And I remember him saying, I think the question might have been something related to how does psychological safety relate to our culture. What are we doing here? Remind me. Relate to workplace culture. And I think that's what it's all about. It's about a leader or leaders who value truth telling and honesty and transparency. And that bottom line is, it doesn't matter your position, we all have each other's back. And I think that's a culture I want to work in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think it's a culture anybody would want to work in, right? Where you feel respected and valued because you feel heard, right?
Yeah.
People want to be heard. And it's one of the most motivating things we can do for one another, is to ask one another for our ideas. It sends the message that we value you, we respect your opinion, your wisdom, your history here. It's one of the simplest, most important things we can do, and not just to make each other feel good and motivate one another, but because maybe we'll get some damn good ideas if we keep asking each other for their ideas. And what do you think, and what do you see from your perspective?
Yeah. The downside, I think, is that, I sent you an article from Center for Creative Leadership that I read. And I think it was something like 60% of senior leaders who were surveyed didn't feel like they had, and it's on a scale, obviously, it's a continuum, but they didn't feel overly psychologically safe in their environment. And so, when that happens, a lot of ideas go unsaid, right? A lot of things just don't happen. And it comes down, psychological safety is about trust. And we said many times, that's the basis of a, as you like to say, rockin' workplace. So,
yeah, for sure. It's totally related to trust. Can I trust the environment that I'm in? Can I trust my manager that I'm able to speak my mind and not have it somehow blow back on me in a negative way? I used to work in this one workplace where it was so political, so toxic. We would rate probably a 2 on the psychologically safe scale, if that. One of the common mantras we all had was, if you have a great idea, keep it to yourself, right? Like, and how ridiculous is that from a business perspective? And it was one of those workplaces where that phrase, and this phrase just drives me nuts, is people would always evoke that phrase, oh, that's a career limiting move. If you ask that question, that's a career limiting move, Michael.
Yeah. I remember my first job in Toronto, actually, and I had a mentor, and he was probably the age I am now, which is really scary. He was really old, is what I'm trying to say. And he seemed it anyway. I was just out of school, and he told me that exactly, that, you just want to keep your mouth shut, bite your tongue, and listen, he said. And it turned out it wasn't true, but I did it, and I got reprimanded for it, that, I wasn't contributing, that they hired me to bring fresh eyes to a situation. And so, sometimes it's the person you're talking to as well. It's not really the culture. How do you think, if we had advice for a young person going into an organization, we've asked this before, but how do they find out if it's a psychologically safe environment?
Oh, that's a great question. That's one. If I was a young person going into a large organization, that's something I would want to bring up in the job interview. In fact, I'd want to know what kind of culture I'm stepping into, and then have that conversation with my boss and say it, right? Do you if I see something, can I speak up about it? Do you want my ideas? Do you want my suggestions? Because I have a lot of ideas for this place. I'm really excited to work here, right?
Yeah.
I think you have to have that conversation.
That's a question Carol is asking. And I'm curious, anybody, if you'll help us out today, how would you suggest somebody in doing their homework about an organization could find out if it's a psychologically safe environment? You can't just ask that. I think that everyone's going to say yes. Oh yeah.
They're going to pay. Of course, it's one of those lip service things that, of course, they're going to say, yes, of course we do. Of course we value your ideas.
And that's just the HR recruiter, not your boss.
Yeah, exactly. Although I do, I certainly, there are surveys, and I have a survey in my book coming up that talks about why people don't speak up. And there's 7 different reasons, or it's from a study, not a survey. And some of them are just astounding, because they are as simple as they just think their boss doesn't want them to, or their boss never asks for ideas, and so they don't speak up.
Right.
There's all these just basic things, but then you've got a company like Nerdery, and I love that name, Nerdery, that lets all its
Wait,
employees.
what are you saying? Nerdery?
Nerdery. It's called
Okay.
Nerdery. It's a
Okay.
software company.
I hope they're a software company.
Yeah. What
If
else
not,
would
was
they be?
wasted.
Nerdery. And they have, and they let all their new employees know right from day one, not only do we expect you to speak up and contribute your ideas, it is your responsibility to speak up and contribute your ideas. Same with Netflix. They've created this culture of open, honest communication with open and honest feedback, where it becomes the norm, right? So that's what we have to do, is we have to make this psychological safety idea, we have to normalize it so that it's normal to have passionate debates in our meetings. It's normalized to give each other feedback on a regular basis, so it doesn't become this big deal. And so same thing, Netflix philosophy is more, one of their many philosophies around this is more or less, wait a minute, if you have a good idea and you're not sharing it with us,
Right.
like that's not a go, folks. Like
That's right.
that is not tolerated. If
Yeah.
you've got a great idea, you better bring it to us.
Devitt asked, and I hope that's your first name, Devitt. I apologize, but Devitt asked, is that just inside the company, or does it extend to if we feel safe for things we may voice on social media? Ooh. I don't think we can create or expect psychological safety zones when we're talking about a mass medium like that, but that's my feeling. I don't know about you, Mike.
On social media, well, yeah, that's a whole topic unto itself. I think we know psychological safety on social media is very low, I would say.
Yeah.
The trolls come out. It's a toxic place to voice opinions. But I think, Devitt, if you're relating this to a workplace idea, where if an employee is voicing things on social media, then that's a tricky issue too, right? Because we don't necessarily want employees to be airing their dirty laundry or personal thoughts to the world. But I think that is, when people do that, sometimes I think that is often a symptom of working in a place where they don't feel psychologically safe to bring this up in their own workplace. And so they maybe go online and vent to the world.
Yeah. I think we should bring back literally bring back the suggestion box. People felt more comfortable, I think, putting in an anonymous suggestion. And it brings me to something else we've talked about many times. It's like in the psychological safety zone, a suggestion is always addressed. Does that make sense? There's so many times that people make suggestions and nothing's done about it, or they never hear about it again. And that's the worst thing that can happen to make people feel secure.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Sure. It's demoralizing to ask.
Yeah, even if it's going back and saying that, Mike, this is why we can't do that. I really appreciate the suggestion. And I've had a recent incident where I've shared with you, I'm working with an 8,000 person organization, and I had a manager say, if I did that for every suggestion I got, I'd spend my whole day getting back to people. Well, aren't you manager?
There's nothing, I joke about this in my talks, where there's nothing worse than feeling like you work in a place where there's a suggestion box, but then it feels like there's a paper shredder on the other side of the suggestion box.
Oh, I love that.
You put in your suggestion, you hear this little and you never hear back from anyone, right? It goes into this black hole. So back to Carol's point, though, right? We have to make sure ideas are asked for, that we're asking people for input, for what they see, for their perspective. But Carol, you're absolutely right. Of course, not every idea is a great idea. So again, that goes to the notion of creating that psychological safety and open and honest communication, where you have these healthy debates, these passionate debates, and where you explain why, that's a great idea. However, we don't feel we can implement it at this time because of this and this, whatever it is. But go back. If you can find a solution to these things, if you can tweak this idea, whatever it is, right? It's all about communication. It's making sure it's a real dialogue, that you're hearing voices, but you're having those opportunities for real exchanges.
Absolutely. And going back to polls, which I like to do, and I found a Gallup poll that said in 2019 they surveyed people about their workplace, and just 3 out of 10, so 30% of employees strongly agreed that their opinions count at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pathetic. But what an opportunity, I think, if you look at it the other way, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're talking about these two companies because they do value people's opinions and they stand out from everybody else. One of the other things that I read, Mike, was that social identity groups, I'll call them, are often marginalized in the workplace.
Right.
For example, I read a survey that basically said that half of female business leaders face difficulty speaking up, especially in virtual meetings. And that to me it didn't give me a reason. I want to know more. I want to know what's the reason behind it. What did those people say? Why they won't speak up? Any thoughts?
Yeah, and I've read similar things too, and some of it is due to gender bias for sure. You read about it all the time. I hear about it from my friends where they get the male voices dominate their meetings. They feel often, and they just feel it's that much more difficult sometimes as a woman to speak up. Not all the time. I reference studies in my book too, coming out about how the best teams and the best meetings, one of the elements that makes it a smart team from this research is that there's a diversity of people around the table, but that the voices being heard are equally distributed, so that meetings or discussions are never dominated by just one or two people. Everybody has a chance to speak up. And so in meetings, especially, that's an important touch point for workplace culture. So it's so important that you facilitate your meetings, that you structure your meetings in such a way that everybody is reminded that they have a voice, that you hear from everybody. It could be as simple as, if you've got a larger group, splitting people up into pods of 2 to 3 people to have little micro discussions where they feel more comfortable bringing up difficult things and then bringing that back to the table. It could be, picking up a banana to make it a little fun and doing the old talking stick with a banana to make sure everybody has a chance to speak up. You could intentionally designate a devil's advocate person on your team to actually take the opposing view and try to figure out what might be wrong with this idea or this suggestion, so you're not falling into a group think situation and making a poor decision, right? So there's all sorts of things we can do in our meetings to just make sure people feel and know that they have a real voice. Pixar movie studios, they have this what's called an anti-hippo policy, and the anti-hippo loosely translates into the highest paid person in the room. So they have this policy that makes it clear we do not want people to defer to whoever's the highest paid mucky muck in the room. All voices are equal when we get into a meeting situation or a brainstorm situation.
So that leads me into something I was thinking about last night as I was thinking about this. And yes, I do think about this in advance and panic that we're only 2 of us instead of the 4 of us. What about hybrid work environments? How has that affected psychological safety? Maybe you can't answer this, and maybe it's a rhetorical question, but when employees aren't co-located, they're working remotely, and so I think it's tougher to establish that trust.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's more challenging, but again, and we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
It speaks to the need to be uber extra intentional about everything, extra intentional about communicating, extra intentional about building trust and how you do that and how you communicate it. And when you have remote meetings, making sure, again, you're doing things like using the technology effectively to survey people, to poll people, to put people into breakout rooms, to have an ice-breaking exercise at the beginning of your virtual meeting so that people feel more relaxed and are more likely to speak up. I mean, I reference a study where they talk about surgical teams where they do nothing more than at the beginning of a surgery, where they go around the team and everybody introduces themselves with their name, their role, and do you have any concerns about this operation? When they do that simple little exercise, when they take the time to do that, the impact in terms of reduced mistakes in the operating room is phenomenal. Like, it's huge.
Something just occurred to me.
Well, yes.
Are they asking each other what obstacles they're going to face, or are they asking is the patient asking who's asking who?
No, the patient isn't listening to this. I'm assuming the patient is, under at this point.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, the patient's not lying there listening to Bob say, I'm not sure we should be doing this. Like, I'm a little worried.
Didn't you mess this up last time you did it?
Yeah. Didn't you screw up the last 3?
Yeah, exactly. That would be an obstacle. So let's get more into the what to do. And I'm going to rely on our brilliant audience.
But sorry, I want to see Yvette's comment here, though.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go for it.
Before we, companies should also be doing progressive evaluations of their actions, leadership as new employees onboard. Absolutely. This way you can find out how the employees feel the company is doing and how to improve. Part of that is questions on, do you feel comfortable talking with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the employee engagement survey. I don't care the size of your organization, you should be surveying your people on a regular basis, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And Richard could talk more to this because he actually has an employee engagement survey in his tool belt if anybody is interested. So perfect. So as I was saying, we have a brilliant audience, obviously. And I'm going to ask all of you to suggest some steps. If you were suggesting to somebody, what do they have to do to create a more psychologically safe environment, the psychological safety environment? Mike, do you have one to start us off to model it?
Well, one thing, again, I'll go back to Netflix because they do a lot of this very, very well. And one of the things they do that I think is very cool that I haven't heard of anyone else doing is they have senior leaders model in front of employees what a healthy debate looks like. So they will debate in front of their employees and debate, and they have these kind of frameworks that they suggest for questions that you ask, like for something like a simple question, just like, well, how do you know that's true, right? To kind of push back on a person's idea, or are you making an assumption here? But they model this in front of their employees, which I think is a fabulous idea to show what a healthy, passionate debate can look like that is focused on the ideas and not on the personalities.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
My first one would be, to make it a priority and make sure your employees know that it's a priority. Connect it to some kind of higher purpose, greater innovation, or team engagement, or inclusion, which is now top of the list. And be vulnerable as a leader as well. Ask for help when you need it and give it when it's needed. So they have to model the behaviors they want to see.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I asked a tough question, and Jenny, shame on you for joining late. But I like that, of course. Act with full transparency.
Okay. Well, okay.
And can I just wait? Can I just stop for a sec? I want to introduce Jackson Kirchhoff, who's on the call. Jackson is a future guest of ours, and he's checking us out, Mike, which I love. And Jackson is a world thought leader on happiness in the workplace.
Oh, very cool.
And so we're going to have him on in I hope, in the next couple of months. So Jackson, welcome.
Welcome, Jackson.
He says, as a manager in a large industrial company that had fairly low psychological safety, I deployed a survey to my employees, which rated me as a supervisor. And that was probably before 360s were a thing, right? It was a totally unheard of concept at the company. But my attitude was, how can I assess your performance and not give you a chance to assess mine? That's so good. That's such a great example, because it's leadership at a very grassroots level, right? Working with frontline employees saying, tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of vulnerability and courage on any leader's part, right? To say, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What do I need to start doing more of? What do I need to stop doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Did you read Carol's comment?
I did. Yes, run, Jackson, run. Oh, Carol, come on.
Don't scare him away, Carol. We want him to be on the show.
Okay, I don't want to miss some of these comments. Yvette said, connect with your employees to make them feel safe, even by walking the floor of a plant and saying good morning and creating a connection. Yeah, that's so important, right? The simple stuff. Like, I cannot stress. That's why I called my book Small Moments, Big Outcomes. The small things that make a difference. Intentional greetings in the morning. Taking a moment. In fact, I reference a study from, I think, from Harvard that talks about how it only takes 40 seconds to demonstrate compassion to another human being. So just making those small moments count. Thank you.
Yeah, it's I talk a lot about it because I stole ideas from healthcare, and it's called rounding in healthcare, right? And how important it is for the C-suite, as I like to say, to round every single day. Just one of them, not everybody. In other words, she's exactly right. Walk through the factory, walk around the offices. This is not, what's a beef session, a complaint session. It's just how you doing. What tools could we give you to better do your job, or whatever it is? But it's that rounding by somebody in a senior leadership position, and I think it's key. When I talk about employee engagement and customer experience, it's one of the number one things I suggest. That's just an easy, check it off kind of thing.
It's an easy win, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I've talked to leaders who will intentionally take a different route to their office when they leave and when they come in the morning to connect with different people.
Yeah. What else? I think another step would be to you have to show curiosity. One of the things I talk about in Coloring Outside the Lines is we need to make our organization, or even just our team, more curious, whatever that means. Being more aware of situations, in my case, of experiences that they can bring back into their organization, massage and change. In this case, it's just showing, again, demonstrating curiosity, I think. Being open-minded, being flexible, being creative yourself. I think that someone will be brave enough to speak up if they know that somebody has their back.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, curiosity is huge, right? And it's and tied into that is, I think, creating a culture of questioning, where it's okay to ask questions, where questions drive curiosity, right? Chicken and egg relationship there, but questions drive conversations forward, where they fuel innovation. It's so important to be curious.
Even though we talk about culture, I like to say create a climate, which is part of the culture, I think, but create a climate where it's okay to ask why. Yeah. And some of us have had 2-year-olds in our lives. A lot of us remember those days. Why, Daddy? Why, Daddy? Why, Daddy? And that's not what I'm talking about. You need to know your team. If you're in a very creative team, you need to limit the whys. But in most cases, people don't feel comfortable speaking up and asking questions, and asking that question specifically. Why? Right?
No.
Or what if we tried this?
I forget the name of the book, but the person is I believe Brent Crozier, and he was a leader in the Navy, and he talked about how in team meetings, in big all hand meetings, he would purposely ask kind of stupid questions that he probably already knew the answer to, but he would ask these questions to make sure, in case there were people that didn't feel comfortable speaking up and might not know the answer, could get the answer, but also primarily to send the message that it's okay to ask stupid questions and ask any question.
Yeah.
So that gets back to the modeling thing again.
Right.
Yeah.
I think another thing too that I've noticed are people feel safer in climates where the leader has recognized that mistakes are just opportunities to grow.
Yeah.
As long as they're not going to bankrupt us, hurt us, legally or physically. Just how do we learn from our failures? And there's so many examples of leaders who haven't done this, and so people now don't say a thing because they're afraid. They're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of failure because somebody got blamed for something somewhere along the way. Instead of saying, "Look, we failed. What did we learn from it?"
Yeah.
So it's debriefing that failure as well. I think it's a huge step in creating this safety.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the whole link to failure and screwing up, that's so important. Those are such important cultural touch points. There's a couple of companies I quote in Scandinavia that actually have things like failure parties, where they celebrate their failures and talk about what they learned, and but they do it in a celebration of fun and positive energy. So they flip it on its head, so people aren't afraid, right?
Yeah.
Because
Uh,
that's the thing, right? And we're not necessarily talking about huge failures, though, here in terms of launching a new idea or a project. When it comes to psychological safety and just speaking up, we have to give each other a little more compassion and patience and space for sometimes saying stupid stuff, right? We're
right.
not going to always be so articulate. Maybe you question that, you could
We're
have asked
living
the question.
examples of this.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. You could have asked that question in maybe a little more tactful way. We're not always going to get it right.
Yeah.
But if we jump down each other's throats every time everyone says something in not, the perfect way, then that's going to hamper psychological safety. Of course
Yeah.
it is. We're going to start, again, self-censoring ourselves, second guessing ourselves.
Yeah. Knowing you so well, I think the other thing is that we have to create space for new ideas, even crazy ones, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes I love to say it's okay to color outside the lines as long as you don't fall off the page, right? And so, but it's okay to suggest it. It's about doing those things that might get us in trouble. I worked with the senior leaders of a huge hospital in California a few weeks ago, and they are encouraged to take 10 minutes every day just to think about new ideas and new processes. And it doesn't matter how busy you are, and you have to put it on your calendar as a regular event. So they do it. And it was really neat to hear them talk about the fact that before this CEO came to work with them, it's only a year and a half ago, the CEO only wanted ideas that had been thoroughly tested or proven. It worked somewhere else. And this new CEO, she's amazing. She said right away, out of the box thinking and ideas are what I'm looking for. Don't bring me, the standard stuff. So that's why I guess coloring outside the lines appealed to her. But I really think we have to create that space.
Totally, right? And it starts with the psychological safety before the actual physical space for ideas, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea, and I love the message that she said, right? We have to do that. We have to be overt about it. I want your ideas, and I don't care how crazy, and I don't care how small they are either, right? Like, we're going to improve things just often with those little 1% improvement ideas.
Yeah.
So bring me those.
Jan Carlson used to be the CEO of SAS Airlines. Don't know if you remember them. Went out of business, but he rescued them. They were the worst airline in the world. They became the best airline in the world in the 1990s or 80s. And he used to say, success is not doing things 1,000% better. It's doing 1,000 things 1% better.
Yeah.
And that's what I always tell organizations and strive for when I'm training. It's if you just get these small wins in every department, in every touch point, they're going to add up to 1,000%, right?
Yeah.
And it takes the weight off a lot of people's shoulders.
Yeah.
Any other tips or suggestions?
Well, I was just gonna reference Carol's comment here too about getting ahead. When you mess up, when you screw up, getting ahead of it, right? And just owning up right away to your boss, to everybody. Admit, and again, that speaks volumes about the level of psychological safety in any team, in any company. Is how easy is it for employees or the bosses to admit their mistakes? That's huge. In fact, speaking of hospitals, Jeff, I remember a study years ago from hospitals in the Midwestern states, I believe, where they were assessing the leadership in these hospitals, assessing all sorts of measurements. And then they found this weird outcome that in the hospitals that had higher scores in terms of employee engagement, in terms of their leadership rankings, there were more mistakes being made in those hospitals. So at first you kind of go, well, these hospitals are higher rated, yet they're making more mistakes. What's going on here? Well, it wasn't that they were making more mistakes. It was that they had the kind of environments where people were admitting and owning up to the mistakes.
Right.
Because in a hospital, that's very important
Right.
to talk
Well,
about
the
mistakes.
opposite or the corollary to that is you got to celebrate wins as well.
Yeah,
Right. And I think we forget to do that sometimes too. Catch
yeah,
them doing something right.
yeah,
I think it is a key.
totally. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the important role that humor can play in all this. Humor and fun and play and laughter. We know from so much research that if your meetings, especially your meetings, are infused with energy and laughter and humor, people feel more comfortable speaking up. They
Mhm.
feel like they can be themselves more. They feel the conversation flows freer. Those seagull voices are kept at bay. It has a huge, huge impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last one that I was thinking about is, somebody came to me and asked me what's one thing we need to do. I think we need to make an intentional effort to promote good dialogue. And notice I didn't just say dialogue.
Yeah.
I think people need to be trained on how to give proper feedback.
For sure.
And there's great training out there. Just, it's a natural if you want to create safety in the environment. Make sure people know how to have difficult conversations, how to, give great feedback, and how to, like what you said. I love the idea of how to debate properly as well, so that it doesn't become personal.
Yeah.
We
And
should-
and it, again, Jeff, I go back to that word normalizing all this, right?
Yeah.
It's so often when all of us have had that experience where we have the pit in our stomach, we can't sleep the night before because we have the dreaded conversation coming up with somebody, an awkward conversation with our boss, with an employee, a coworker. We're dreading it. It's been stewing on us for weeks. It's just horrible. And we put all this pressure on the conversation, and now it becomes this championship match of the century because we put so much on this. And I think we have to get away from that. We have to normalize it by doing this stuff on a routine basis, so it doesn't feel awkward to give our coworkers a little bit of constructive feedback because we're used to it. It's a daily kind of thing that just happens now. And even when it is a more contentious or controversial conversation, never looking at it as just one conversation, look at it as a series of conversations.
Exactly.
And that takes the pressure off, right? So you think I'm going to have just the first conversation with this person.
Unless you're firing them.
Unless you're firing them, then maybe it's the first and last conversation on this issue.
Jenny says, feedback is specific, but it's specific feedback instead of just you're doing a great job, keep it up, kind of feedback, pat on the back.
Yeah,
for
sure. And the concept of feed forward, right? Where we don't talk about the past at all, where we train our employees to give feed forward and make recommendations on a couple of specific behaviors that they could focus on in the future, because unless we're Marty McFly going back to the future, we can't change the past.
Okay. I haven't seen that in how long? 25 years.
I don't know. It's been a while.
You can quote anything and I will agree with you. So kind of wrap things up. It's already almost time. I think there are different kinds of safety, and we didn't get there. But I think what we've been talking about today, if I were to kind of put an umbrella on it, is about inclusion. I alluded to it. I think it's the first step, and to make sure that everybody feels included. I know it's a buzzword of the day, but I really buy into it. And by the way, I don't think it should be diversity and inclusion. I think it should be inclusion first, and then you'll end up with a more diverse workforce. So that's what I try to, my clients, I try to get them to strive for inclusion, not necessarily diversity first. So that's my 2 cents worth. Any closing thoughts?
Well, and I'll just add to that. I agree, but that also that important element of a true sense of belonging, right? Where people feel like I belong in this team, in this workplace. I'm a co-creator in this workplace's future, right? I can contribute to the success and future of this business, of this team, but I have to feel like I belong if I'm going to suggest ideas or even care, right? Or even be curious about my business. I have to feel like I belong. And we have to recognize there's a difference between fitting in and truly belonging. when we try to fit in on a team, that suggests we might have to adapt our speaking style, our personality to mesh ourselves with the people around us, versus belonging evokes this idea that we are welcome just bringing ourselves, our best selves, hopefully the best version of ourselves, to this team.
Yeah.
And feeling comfortable being ourselves. When I ask people when they are in organizations that they just love working in, why they like this organization so much more than any other job they've worked in, an answer they say time and time again is, this is the first place I've worked in where I feel like I can bring my authentic self to work.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so happy.
Doesn't get better than that. You're right. Well, it's that time.
It is.
Yeah, it really did go quickly, and that's
It
because we
did.
didn't have Sanjay talking.
I know. Sanjay interrupting us with stupid jokes. And
Hopefully, Sanjay and Mike will be back on our next every other
Mike, did you say
Wednesday.
Mike?
Did I say Mike?
You
Sorry.
did.
Richard.
His name's
Even
Richard.
though-
How quickly we forget.
When I put a comment in the box, I have Richard's picture because I'm on his Zoom. But we are back on Wednesday, 2 weeks, June
2 weeks.
12th. And we have a very special guest that I'm not going to tell anybody about. I'm just going to tease our audience.
Okay.
We have a great
Even
guest.
I'm excited.
Yeah, you should be.
I am.
It's your wife, actually. So,
Yes.
it's
my wife.
we invited Claudine, yes, to talk about you.
Uh-oh. I might have to miss that one.
So, Mike, any closing comments? Anything else?
No, just as always, thank you. And thank you, Jenny, for that last comment. That's awesome. Thank you, everyone, for your wisdom. Thank you for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you 2 weeks from now.
And where do we see them?
Same time, same place.
On
Every
what
other
show?
Wednesday.
Every other Wednesday. Bye, guys. Thanks for being here.
Have a great day, everyone.